Good morning. Who's awake? So this
Good
is
morning.
I'm not.
early for us, isn't it? We've oh no, we didn't. We used to for years. We did it on Friday mornings, really early. So it's actually quite late, but it feels.
Well, Friday morning was different, Stephen, because it was 7:30 and before work. I'm usually awake at that time. Usually on Sundays, I'm not waking up at this time.
So we've all hauled ourselves out of our collective beds, different beds, might I add. Nobody knows
Collective bed, yeah, there's a rumour to start.
and because I think we're all busy this afternoon, and so we're going to do this today because we didn't do it last week because we didn't have enough of us. So and the week before, oh my God, talk of the devil, David's just appeared.
Oh, very good.
Well, we'll see. So
yeah, I thought he's still recovering after conference. Good morning, David. I thought you're still recovering.
We were just speculating that we all woke up early and pulled ourselves out of our individual beds and we wanted to whose bed you were in. But you're in your own bed apparently because that's your house.
Yes.
Good morning. How are you feeling?
I've got con crud. If you go to a gaming convention and you inevitably get some sort of lurgy because of everybody's dubious personal hygiene,
I was going to say
that's con crud. And I picked up something at the conference.
So are you saying that conference attendees have the same hygiene standards as adolescents who play Dungeons and Dragons?
Adolescents?
Well, and older men like yourself and me occasionally. Yeah, I was saying that political people have.
I'll tell you what we can do. We can have a live webcast this morning of David dying slowly.
Yeah, let's do that. That would be good. You might get the numbers.
No, my other half, who's a doctor, thinks there might be one of the new variants of COVID that's been going around that I've had. I'm not. I've got the cough. Apart from that, it's gone. I just feel knackered. So yeah. I went to bed early last night. I just feel wiped out.
So I had something similar last week, but I think because I went to work in Parliament. I think a few people had it there in the office, and then like just the week before conference, just really lucky because I thought I can't feel this bad at conference because it's such an intense 5 days. So luckily I was feeling fine, but some colleagues were saying that it might be this other COVID variant that's around. It started a few weeks ago.
Okay. Can we just say hats off to Thomas Edwin Stevens, who's managed to find us at this time of the morning?
Yeah. Morning, Thomas. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you were both at the Labour Party conference, weren't you? Last weekend, and was it this last week as well? How much last week was it? I must admit I pay very little attention to party conferences, so you're gonna have to tell me how it went on and what was the mood like, because it's been a difficult time for Labour recently in the polls, isn't it? I think how was the mood at the conference?
Well, David and I had, I think, a bit different experience because David was one of our delegates. So it means he was a lot on the conference floor. So he can tell you all about the speeches and what happened there. I was there kind of part in work capacity, part as a counselor, which means I was mainly attending some of the fringe events, like speaking to people, like having meetings outside the conference floor and doing less. Apart from Keir Starmer's speech and Rachel Reeves' speech, I haven't actually been in the conference hall listening to what was going on there. So I was more on the fringes of the conference, but I would say that overall, I think for members, there were like some very positive announcements that not only for members, but I think for everyone, such as, a library in every primary school, which is one of the headlines, means tested universities, the maintenance grants, like coming back, fair pay agreements in social care, some announcements around the new towns and building, a lot of the build baby build narrative from Steve Reed and others, obviously like highlighting the free breakfast clubs and some of the other achievements so far. So I think there was a lot of focus on what was done positively, speaking about that, what else will Labour do. However, I have to say that one of the things that was noticeable is how the narrative has changed. not only in Keir Starmer's speech, but in some of the ministers as well, around a bit more, I would say, like a stronger narrative positioning Labour against reform, but also a stronger narrative around migration as well, in the sense of, I think it was the first time I actually heard Keir Starmer in a conference speech saying, something is racist, or like, a policy of removing people who are already lawfully in the country, racist and so on. I think that kind of stronger language on those issues did these members, who are many of them quite concerned that Labour was shifting more towards reform in terms of the immigration policy. However, I have to say that despite the narrative being more positive, now the detail of the policy the government is doing has to match that narrative, because otherwise what's the point to just have the narrative on it? But it's kind of my take, and we're waiting for the details on a lot of things that will come through, the white papers, consultations and so on. But that's one of my takes on it. What do you think, David?
So, I think people arrived. So so I was on the conference floor. So to a certain extent, I was with the party faithful, who are people who want to be convinced, and I'm sure that's true of me. And things have been wobbly recently. And I think the party the party has been criticised for being, I don't know what the word is, like not listening to the membership, and being a bit sort of tone deaf about things. I think they were very clearly, saying, look, we recognise we've got things wrong, but. And so you got lots of the usual long listings of the the achievements of the government, which are considerable, and good to see. And I think there was also a look. We're just getting started. It's a long way till the next election, that sort of thing. And I actually think the leadership was done a big favour by Andy Burnham, and the whole mainstream Labour thing. Now the mainstream Labour is a sort of new faction or whatever within Labour, and I think it's trying to say, I think it's trying to be sort of similar to Open Labour before it, in that it's not too factional, but then this is the Labour Party, so even the non-factions are factions, and I think it's trying to say, look, yeah, broadly, like what the government's doing, but there are some places where it's got it wrong. And I think that could have resonated with people, but it also got tied in with sort of Andy Burnham's own ambitions, or that's how it was perceived. And the reaction was the last thing we need is a leadership challenge or noises off from somebody who isn't who isn't even in Parliament, isn't eligible to be leader. Being difficult, and a lot of it is and I've said I'm quite positively disposed towards Andy Burnham. I think that actually in a strange way helped the leadership, because a lot of the people that I was talking to were saying, well, like, what the hell is he playing at? It's like, yeah, a lot of this is good stuff, but why is he angling for the leadership? And I think that in a strange way helped. But I think some of the announcements I think are really were good. I think there were two that are going to cause problems. One is immigration, and one is one that was hinted at, and I think was actually announced after conference, which it looks like we might be doing something on the 2-child benefit cap, because on the 2-child benefit cap, everybody in Labour wants to get rid of it. Outside of the Labour Party, it's actually quite popular. And there needs to be
not for Martin.
No.
But public opinion wise, you're right. I think it depends how you present it. But it depends on what polling question you're asking. I think some of the public opinion polling doesn't show majority support, but it depends how you frame it, and whether you justify it as, if we go rid of this, it will prevent X or Y, or if you just ask the question in itself. So I think it depends a bit on how you phrase the question.
Is some of that supposed to be addressing the demographic crisis we've got, in that we're not reproducing quickly enough, and we're not producing enough young people to pay our old age pension bill? Or is it more just a political stunt, do you think? Is it a social welfare, wanting to do better by people as well? Is all of those things?
It's a moral thing.
Okay.
Yeah, but also I think it's linked to, obviously, the government has the child poverty strategy, and there are two things. One is the discussion around the cap, the benefits cap, and the other one is discussion around the many thousands of children. Some of them are British children, some of them are not British children, but with migrant parents, and the migrant parents have no recourse to public funds if they're not settled. And I think if the government wants to, as they say, eliminate child poverty, have no child living in poverty in the UK, as they kind of positioned their policy platform, you cannot discuss those two aspects, because those are inevitably linked to what extent the government can achieve its target on child poverty.
It's not just child poverty, though, is it? And this is the point for me. And I do that's the point for me. As a One Nationist, that's the sort of thing we should be aiming at, which is raising aspirations, and helping people, and putting a ladder in front of people and helping them to climb that ladder, and as soon as you starve people of money, the less flexibility they've got in terms of workforce, in terms of where they work, as an example, how they can fund their own training sometimes and stuff like that. All those things all linked together, and so that poverty. The point about poverty for me is it's not. The aspiration to raise poverty is absolutely 100%, but it's some of it is how you do it, but it's what poverty means in terms of, once you get there, it's really, really hard to break out of it, and we need to start getting to a position where we provide ways out, and one of the ways out is getting rid of the two-child benefit cap, because the two-child benefit cap does keep people in poverty who wouldn't otherwise be there. So I personally I think it should be got rid of. I can see why the Conservatives did it. It's an easy message to send, but it's very, very much not a One Nationist message. But you wouldn't expect that from the Conservative Party.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, how many of those policies have been decided with what is shorter term beneficial in public opinion. And I think about some of the immigration policies, in both, now watching some of the news emerging from Conservative Party conference as well as Labour Party conference, everyone on immigration seems to be moving to match what reform initially proposed, right? So whether it's the Conservatives coming out saying we'll get out of the ECHR and the implications that will have, or whether Labour is saying we're going to extend the route to indefinite leave to remain from 5 years to 10 years, it's kind of moving, whether you agree with the policy itself or not, it's moving in towards the direction.
My big criticism of the Conservative Party is they are trying to spend their time being too much like Reform. They're not setting their own identity, and there's no reason to vote Conservative if all they're doing is being Nigel Farage. Then people are going to vote for Nigel Farage. He's the original. I don't like Nigel Farage particularly, but I can see why people do it. And when they've not got an alternative from the Conservative Party, of course, they're going to drift there. And, the first mutterings we hear from the Conservative Party for their conference are they're going to deport 150,000 people using the Trump-like ICE force, 150,000 people a year. And, the stuff, the other, it's all, the ECHR stuff. So they've got no identity of their own, and that's what they desperately need. But the only way they're going to be able to do that is by moving back to the centre, and the Conservative Party membership won't have it. And so I do think there's a difference between what the Labour Party are doing with immigration. They are, to a certain extent, that they are treading their own path. And I think that the Labour Party are. The Conservative Party are absolutely not.
Yeah,
So
I agree
what
with that. Yeah, I think that sorry, go on, Stephen.
No, I was going to say, well, what is the Labour Party's solution to this? Because it's obviously a huge issue, isn't it? And obviously, I mean, everywhere now and all the forums, you can see that, you know, even during the Brexit days, people were embarrassed to talk about it, but you see people like piling on every thread, especially your threads, Alex, you know, because you're were born in Romania. You get loads of people commenting on everything, and it's, you know, the discourse is frankly racist. And we said, you know, Ben Abisi-Jekti, who's the MP for Huntingdon, who is a British man, a black British man, gets all sorts of abuse for the same reason. And so people are being much more openly racist than they used to be, and that's driven by this hate agenda, isn't it? And so it's difficult, isn't it? Because and the whole rise of reform is based on a public concern, whether legitimate or not, and that's democracy sometimes.
I have a former work colleague who is she's an Asian MP, Labour MP, and she gets exactly the same. And it's I was saying this on some media I did on Friday that you know, we've got to find a way of stopping this. The way language has drifted. So at the very least, it's become acceptable to tread right on the edges of what is racism. And what you are seeing, and Keir Starmer was right to a certain extent about this, is people actually drifting into racism, and some people overtly. And the fact that we're in a society where that can be the case, I think is shocking. And you know, I talk about all forms of racism in that, and that includes anti-Semitism, which is a big issue as well. As you know, we saw sadly on
this week, yeah.
I mean, to come back to the question on what is Labour, how I interpret like what is Labour doing. So I think Martin, I agree with Martin. Like, I think the Conservatives try to match the reform rhetoric to being like, well, we're going to deport X number a year, like, and kind of the whole narrative is, but we'll do it more efficiently and we actually know what we're speaking about, unlike reform who won't be able to implement their policy. On the Labour side, I think the narrative is not necessarily wrong. Like, the narrative on immigration is around the idea, whether you want to criticize the concept or not, but the idea of contribution. So all those policy announcements emerge from, well, we have to like lengthen the pathway to show that people are contributing before they're settling, or this announcement around like people should volunteer in their community to be able to shorten their pathway to settlement. I personally think it's a very difficult policy to implement, because how are you able to, you know, have enough caseworkers in the Home Office to decide whether me going on a litter pick counts as volunteering or not? But I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think like all those things are framed within the narrative of everyone wants to, you know, see people who are contributing. We want to broaden the meaning of contribution beyond the fiscal impact and economics, which is not necessarily a wrong one, seeing people like various contributions of people, and then obviously calling out, say, the reform policy, saying it's racist to say we're going to get rid of indefinite leave to remain and remove people whose life is in the UK. However, by kind of lengthening the process and applying new conditions, unless you don't apply it retrospectively at all, you still will end up in a situation where there will be a group of people who will not qualify for it if the rules kind of change after they start their pathway. So I think the moral thing to do is to say everything we say will apply from the moment we implement this new policy. It won't apply to anyone who came before. Now we're changing the rules, so when you come to the country, now you know what the pathway to settlement is. But I think there needs to be a lot of detail, and indeed there actually will be consultation on this. The policy is not set in stone, but around the kind of like criteria and how, for example, you're going to reform the Life in the UK test, or how are you going to measure volunteering contribution. I think there are a lot of like just policy questions and implementation questions.
I don't think you should be measuring it, I have to say, and this is where I differ to what is Labour's mentality sometimes. I do think we need to drive towards an expectation. I also think, you know, there's a principle within One Nationism, which is about a thing called noblesse oblige, nobility obliges, which is about the responsibility that people in positions of privilege have and positions of wealth have in terms of how they look after those in need. And I think there's something about that needs reinforcing as well, and needs talking about. And that includes, to me, it includes companies as well. You know, companies that are living, and making a living and a good living out of communities where there's a lot of difficulty. and deprivation and whatever, and the responsibility those companies have. And it's actually in their interests, because the more they can drive up the aspirations, the more they can drive up the standard of living, and the qualifications in the community around them, the better they're able, the better the population they're able to draw from for their own employees, as an example. And those things, they definitely need talking about. I wouldn't measure it, I don't think, per se, because I just think you create a bureaucracy out of volunteering, and we need less.
There's no volunteering anymore. That's the point.
Yeah,
There's nothing more useless than a reluctant volunteer as well. They really, everybody's been there in those places where people are just like dialing it in because they've been told to do something, or they're doing it for the Duke of Edinburgh award or something. And those people are never any good. You have to, volunteering is something you have to do by choice, I think.
Can I add something into this? So I'm standing for election at the moment as an independent, and one of the things I've come up against in Whittlesea, and this is talking about responsibilities and stuff like that, is that we've got an organisation in Whittlesea called Whittlesea Emergency Food Aid. It is what it does what it says on the tin. It's a great organisation, and some good people behind it. We're going through a process at the moment of deciding the future of the Manor Leisure Centre, and a big part of that is a big part of the Manor is going to be knocked down, and I can sort of see why they're doing that, and understand it, because it's a bit of a white elephant. Is the reality. It used to be a big gym hall where people played badminton and all that stuff, and a lot of that doesn't happen anymore. But one of the things that's inside that building is Whittlesea Emergency Food Aid, and they've written to Fenland and asked for some assurances. And from what I've seen, Fenland, the response from Fenland is not, look, we'll try and help you find a new premises, we'll do everything we can, blah blah blah. It's just no assurances. That's it. And this is an organisation that inevitably saves Fenland money. Because if people are not able to afford food, you can bet your bottom dollar they're struggling with rent and they're struggling with mortgages, and they'll end up, homeless in bed and breakfast accommodation and all this stuff, which is everything we need to avoid. So if we're able to ease the pain by providing, food for people that are in need, if that helps them stay in the house because it frees up money to pay for rent, that stops people. It's a good thing anyway, but it also stops people becoming a burden to the district council because of bed and breakfast accommodation, needing to find social housing, all those sort of things. So for Fenland just to say no assurances, it just shows to me, it's exactly what we're talking about responsibilities.
So, and it's never just food as well, because having volunteered a couple of times at the St Neots Food Bank, those volunteers are very, very switched on the pathways to get people help. And I know in the St Neots Food Bank and probably across Huntingdonshire, there's debt advisors there as well, so they help people out of debt, which is one of the most pernicious reasons why people find themselves visiting food banks. And my friend Kerry volunteers, who sometimes listens to this show, and like she's one of the best resources for helping people in trouble, because she knows all the pathways and who to contact at the district council. And so as soon as you eliminate those things, it's like Citizens Advice Bureau is underfunded these days as well, and is also quite intimidating for people to go to for the first time. It shouldn't be. So there aren't many other pathways, are there? And so I think the food bank is almost a food first point of contact for lots of people, and they do a fantastic job. And if you don't give those people a place to hand out their food parcels, then it's tragic.
No, absolutely, and it's but it's a state of. I mean, part of the reason why I'm standing for election. But let's not talk about my election. But it's a really important issue, and it makes exactly that point about responsibilities, and the fact that if you shirk your responsibilities, in terms of businesses and people that have, actually it comes back to bite you anyway.
And costs more money long term as well, so you don't save anything, do you? So
absolutely.
So another big announcement in local politics from the Labour conference was the reintroduction of councillor pensions, which is something I think was it Eric Pickles got rid of all those years ago.
Eric, yeah.
Yeah, and so what do we all think about? I mean, in terms of the public perception of local politics, they all think that all councillors get paid massive allowances and get brown paper envelopes. I can see that as being a policy that's not very popular with the general public, who don't really understand how difficult and how well anybody who's a councillor for their money, I would severely question their sanity, because it's not a way of making any money at all. But do we think that pensions for councillors are a good idea?
Yes, I think it's a good idea, but it needs to be explained, because I think you're right, Stephen. If you just announce it, given the kind of like misperceptions about councillor pay or benefits and so on, I think it needs to be explained in the context of like what's the allowance range and the fact that councillors don't have that and how does it work. I think it also speaks to like a bigger issue like that I would like to see like parties address, which is the growing number of people, and this applies to obviously people who are councillors and do some work on the side as well, but the growing number of people who are self-employed or working on different contracts and who are not planning for their pension, because it's very easy, I think, especially when you're in your 20s or 30s, to be like, yeah, I'm doing some like volunteering or like civic duties, and councillors, I'm like maybe like working a bit self-employed, like, you know, like I am, for example, and I don't remember like every month to actually contribute, you know, privately to a pension pot. And I think they're like more and more compared to like 30, 40 years ago, when everyone had like the same kind of standard package in a job, like most of the jobs. Now we have a growing number of people who won't have, you know, access to enough pension when they actually are, if we ever get to retirement age. And I think that's something that, like, of course, with councillors, I don't think I know many councillors who are proactively thinking like, yes, I have to put another contribution to my pension pot because I don't get any contributions from my councillor time. And I think there are very few who do that. And I think this kind of like will ensure that at least you have, you know, something for it that's already saved for you.
It's from my perspective, it's an absolute no-brainer. We need to drive up the standard of councillors, and this is the right step towards it. And you know, there's a reality, which is the reason councillors are given allowances is because, you know, that they're sacrificing an element of career in one way or another, whether it's, you know, the time out for doing council business, or because their role as a councillor probably takes away a little bit from what they're doing at work. So, you know, we need to be, if we are going to compensate people for what they lose, it's inevitable that by spending time as a councillor and less time at work, by sacrificing income, then you're also going to be sacrificing pension. So of course we should do this. It's an absolute no-brainer.
Is it? But are there any contributions from the council, or is it just an opportunity for councillors to buy into a local government pension?
So my understanding is, and this is certainly how it used to work, is that you basically sign up to the local government pension scheme and become a member of the local government pension scheme. So it's both your contributions and the council contributions. I mean, it's relatively minor. It's incredibly minor in the bigger scheme of things.
So given how small council allowances are, though, yeah, we're talking of order, you know, even for district and county council. Well, district council is less than £10,000 for a you know, a backbench councillor. I think a standard one for county council is 11 or 12 now, isn't it? Like, if you put 5% of that into a pension scheme, it's going to be like 600 quid a year. So it's not ever going to be massive amounts of money, isn't it? And it's, I mean, one of the reasons why I would have liked to be able to put all of my allowance into a pension, but I'm at that age where I'm relatively pension obsessed, and I probably don't need the allowance money per se. And I'd love to have, you know, be bumping up my pension. You can do it anyway. You can make you can make private contributions to your pension plan anyway, and just take them out of your tax return if you've got a private pension. So I guess it's talking to people who don't have that. It's a nice idea, and I do think, I mean, in general, I think that like you say, I think councillors needs to be more financially rewarding. So, well, not rewarding that people don't lose out by being councillors, because I think I substantially have. You know, I would say my 8-year political career was probably a key reason why I lost my job last year and got made redundant. You know, it ended up being a good story for me because I like my new job. But you know, you can't say that for sure. But you know, it's a distraction, and when you're always out doing meetings and daytime meetings and taking holiday, and you're not as present as you might be, I think it can be a big issue. So nobody should be financially disadvantaged by being a counsellor, and I think that most people probably are, aren't they? If you're a full-time counsellor, especially town and parish councillors like David, who don't get any allowance at all.
No, I absolutely. I think we're all in agreement on this. I think, are we?
Well, I wonder now with the unitaries coming up, I think there's an opportunity now with more councils becoming unitaries to just reform the allowances and how they're decided. Not having councillors vote for their own increases because it's toxic every single year, and regardless of how much you justify the argument, I really think allowances should be set by a different body. I don't know, it can be like an expert forum or involving residents or whatever, but I don't want every time to have a vote in the council and every time the headline to be that councillors vote to increase their allowances by 3% or 4%. I think it should a body of people with experience should look at this and say, actually, for the amount of work on average councillors that do, the allowance for unitary council should be X, and it should be standardized, maybe a bit different in London or in areas with higher costs, but it should be standardized.
See, for me, the way to do it is a national formula of some sort.
Yeah.
Look at a national formula that says this is your population, this is the role of your council, everything else. A little bit potentially of weighting for places like London, so that you can balance it out, but do something like that. So that there is a proper assessment, as an example of if councils take on more of a role in certain areas. So personally, I would love unitaries to take to go back a step in terms of the responsibilities for schools and school performance. And if you brought that in and added that as a responsibility for unitaries, you could put that in and factor it into councillors' allowances, and I think something like that makes a lot more sense because the system we've got is toxic.
Yeah. There is an independent body, though, isn't there? I think it's through the LGA who does review.
There is the review, and you get the report. The problem is that you have to vote for the recommendations or against, and there's so much. And it's always political pressure because it depends if you're in opposition or not. Literally, you have the same party who is in control voting for something, and the same party next door, in opposition, making the political point that we're not increasing our allowances. And I think it's just some people stick to their principle and never vote for an increase, and that's fine. Or they want to donate to charity, and that's fine. But I think most people are on one side or another, depending on what side of control they are, which is just wrong. And I think in no other job you vote for your own pay. You either have salary scales, even in small not-for-profits, you have a board of directors or someone who's overseeing the pay increase. You're not voting for your own pay, even in small companies or small not-for-profits, most of them, unless you're the sole director and you have overall control.
With the system we have, my view is always just vote for the independent panel and let it be known that's what you're always going to do. I've only ever done it, not voted for the independent panel once, and that was for the allowances scheme that was put in place when Cambridgeshire moved to the committee system, because the independent panel just didn't get it, and they fundamentally got it wrong. And what I did, because I was the leader at the time, because the independent panel had clearly messed it up, I asked the chief executive, based on the total salary package that had been put together by the independent panel, to rejig and put something else together, because it was quite clear and quite clear that things were wrong. And I think there was a consensus that it was wrong. What ended up happening was all the opposition groups ganged together and weighted the allowances in their favour.
So I'm also not confident that LGR is going to fix the problem of council allowances, because my friend and colleague on Hunstanshire District Council, Brett Mickelberg, went through and did kind of a quick desk review of what unitary councillors get paid. And so whereas a HDC is $8,000, I think counties it's 12 grand. I think unitaries would get 14 or 15 grand, and that's for a daytime council, which ends up being especially with fewer members as well, probably in LGR. So it ends up being almost a full-time job. And actually, I mean, I one of the reasons I didn't stand for county is that it wasn't sustainable alongside a full-time job, because you have daytime meetings. I was doing up to 20 hours a week in like just meetings. Yeah, for 11 grand a year, like everything suffers as well. So I think, you know, it should be, if it's going to be a daytime role, it should be closer to the level that people can exist on it, because, you know, nobody can survive on 14 grand.
I personally have the view that we should have less counsellors and more professional counsellors. I definitely think it's the right way forward. I think in terms of democracy, I think things would function better. I think you would drive up the standard of counsellors you've got. And I think it would be a little bit of justice as well for the effort that goes into it.
And I think it might be that there needs to be some expectation about how many hours you're putting in, because the sad reality is that there are some counsellors who don't do anything, but there are some who go in with the best of intentions and think it's, you know, think it's an evening a week, and it isn't.
Well,
I mean, the issue as well is like how can you hold to account people who don't do anywhere? Because at the moment, if you show up once every 6 months, it's fine. You don't trigger the by-election. Obviously, you might not be elected next time because people will realize you're not doing anything, not showing up to meetings. But there's no mechanism of like accountability beyond, you know, like just like getting voted out the next time, which might not even happen because you might be voted on based on your party rather than what you did personally or whether you attended at all the meetings. And there are examples of people, obviously minority of people who don't do much or don't respond to anything, don't show up to council meetings. But obviously if your party happens to be popular in that next election, you can still get in, like regardless of whether you did anything at the local level. And I think I'm not sure like how to deal with that, because obviously it's an elected position. So if your party is popular, well, it's only fair, you know, people vote for you, you should be elected.
I mean, I think
it's worth saying, by the way, and adding in this point, Fenland District Council have relatively low allowances compared to others, and at the same time they have daytime meetings as well. And so you look at the age profile of Fenland District Council, and you can see why, and that's the point about, and just to go back and just challenge a little bit on what you said, Alex, you are right. There's some councillors that do loads and some that don't. I don't know how you do what you do, by the way, and the way you do it, but it's also true that some councillors are retired and this is effectively a hobby for them.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, you know, it's a lot easier for them to do more.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure like how you'd have a mechanism to do that, because you don't want to end up, because it should still be an elected position, obviously, and whoever wins the election should have that mandate. So I don't think you can have a mechanism to hold people to account, because yes, of course, if you're retired and can spend all your week on council duties, is very different, and is very different standard or expectation than someone who, I don't know, like Stephen, like works full time and has district and county and tries to do all three of them. It's just like a different time availability you have.
So I think part of it is there is a role for political parties here in getting better candidates, but also and I'm sure this will annoy my regional officer if he hears me say it. I think we need to get away from the mentality of standing everywhere. Because I used to say this to the Conservative Party. I would rather put up no candidate than a good candidate, especially when you put in the
bad candidate.
The bad candidate.
That explains a lot about the Muslim
but they wouldn't go with that, and you know, they would rather have a bad candidate win under a Conservative ticket.
Yeah.
And it's true of all political parties, so that's not me slamming the Conservative Party.
No, it is true across the board, I think.
Yeah.
And that's and the thing is, I get it. It's you know, we want to win and so on, but it's I mean, I think the part of it is also there is this is the sort of lack of sort of media covering, you know. You can do very little as a councillor, and there's not going to be any accountability for it. You might, there might be some You know, it's unlikely there'd even be much on Facebook beyond does everybody know how to get hold of this person. And that's a problem, the sort of lack of accountability and just not even accountability, just awareness of what councillors are doing or aren't doing, I think is a problem.
We should give a shout out to any listeners in Thailand as well. Morning, Ryan.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. Anyway,
we'll never know the truth, but yeah, I mean it's a difficult one because unless you make it a full-time role, which you can't anyway, because you still want to open the opportunity to people who have other responsibilities and some work, then you can't like hold it to like a performance management standard.
But there are things. So the most front-facing committees, planning, licensing, as an example, by default they should be held in the evening so they're accessible to people.
So and the reason why I'm still a district councillor is because the meetings are mostly in the evenings as well, and I can do it and I can fit in around my life, and so it's it's a lot more doable. Like, but daytime meetings at county, especially the 5-6 hour full council meetings in which nothing was discussed, did it for me in the end, I think. So yeah, I think evening meetings are better, and they're more accessible to the general public as well. I think, especially with people who have childcare issues, especially if they're live streamed. You have people sitting in watching meetings in the evening rather than the daytime. Most people are busy or at work, aren't they? So it helps all round. Originally on my notes, I had this written down. Instead of councillor pensions, I had councillor pencils. I also think that councillor pencils would be a nice idea. I like a nice pencil. Apparently, Martin's got lots of pencils as well, so he's going to have to.
So could you clarify on this outrageous councillor pencils idea? Is this a pencil that says councillor or a personalised pencil for each councillor?
Oh, that would be really good, wouldn't it? I've been through a fair amount of my own stationery when I've been a councillor. I've had to pay for all myself, so having a pencil would be a good start.
Yeah. No, that is what the allowance is for. Like, sorry, that's the whole purpose of the allowance. To buy as many pencils as you want.
What sort of propelling pencils?
Oh, I love those. Yeah, definitely. I think you can't. Yeah, you can't meet. I like quite a soft pencil. Is it like a 2B or not? HBs are a bit too hard. Anyway,
can I move on to something else that was discussed in the Labour Party conference?
Yeah,
which I think is relevant to local government. But Steve Reid, as well as talking about pensions, he said that there would be no sudden twists and turns in policy following the reshuffle, and that's obviously about him replacing Angela Rayner, which I think is really good. But he also said that when looking at local government reorganisation, he said the best outcomes in terms of services for residents and also boosting economic boost would be his priority. And I think it's quite reassuring to see that and to see at least some basis for which local government reorganisation is taking place to happen. But I also think that's potentially good for Cambridgeshire as well.
So ultimately, though, it is a positive message because, when we started talking about this at Christmas time and, the messages were that all the leaders of all the districts were going to get together and try to come to some consensus opinion. And that's clearly not going to happen now, is it? Because almost every district, has its own idea. Yeah, lots of these things. I made a little speech. I got told off by the chair of St Neots Town Council, saying, because I was complaining about the county council position, where county council is it seems to be publicly backing a single option, which we all think is a political option favoured by, because it would kind of unify Liberal Democrat power across East Cambs, Cambridge City, and South Cambs, and so it looks incredibly political to me. It hasn't been discussed yet, has it, at County Council?
No, it will be in the October Council, so in like
that's going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, but it's true to say, like, obviously the administration, which is the majority, are publicly backing option A, and that's probably what the discussion will be in October. The papers are not published yet, but I expect it to be around what we think about this option and the council's position.
I'm not sure if David was at the Kapauk I called it Kapauk concert at the meeting. Everybody laughed at me at the Kapauk conference, where we had county officers, basically saying that it was the county's preferred option, and it's not the county council's preferred option, because the county council can't have an opinion, can it? Yeah. Unless
it's the administration's preferred option, and that's what the press release says. But it's being reported, and I get emails being like, "I see you support option A," and I said, "Like, wait a second, I haven't supported any option publicly. We didn't even have the debate yet. I didn't have a vote on this issue." But I think the press release is correct. Is like the administration It's preferred
Yeah,
option.
but I think that's not the message. What I heard I wasn't there at the conference, but I heard from colleagues from across the political spectrum that was the message, and they quizzed officers there, and you shouldn't have officers putting, and they have to be very specific in what they're doing. And I don't think that public money should be spent on kind of promoting any of these options unless the councils are voted for, or if they're in a cabinet system where you've got executive responsibility.
But I suspect even under a cabinet system, a decision like this would be a full council decision. It would be my guess. But one of the things I've noticed is I know Hunts have put forward their unitary proposal, which I think is a mistake, to be honest.
So we can talk about that.
But East Cams are pushing very, very very, very hard against the being included as part of Greater Cambridge at the moment. There was
So you've got the Liberal Democrat run county council pushing to have East Cams as part of kind of the South, yeah. And you have the elected administration just about, because it's a very, very tight, I think there's a one seat in it, isn't it? Anna Bailey and all pushing to be part of the North, yeah, which is strange. You have factions in Peterborough pushing.
I don't know whether I haven't heard them push to be part of the North. I've heard them push against being part of the South. So there was. That's
almost a coin flip, because if you're not part of the South, yeah, I mean, they could be in a band with Huntingdonshire, perhaps, in the middle. Yeah, that's possible as well. It could be Fenland, because there is a faction in Peterborough pushing for Peterborough, but the same argument is Peterborough by itself probably isn't economically viable as its own unit.
So I think this is one of the big, I'm in favour of local government reform, yada yada yada. The way that the government chose to go about it by getting the councils themselves to come up with proposals, I don't think was a great idea. I get the need and the desire to do things quickly, but like Redcliffe Moor took 2 years, and that was to design an entire new system. Here, the system's been designed, and it's just coming up with the boundaries. But I think having even if it's not being done for partisan reasons, the look is not good, is it?
No, but I think you go on.
The issue with the idea about speed, I think speed sadly has got to be everything in this, because of where we are as a country politically. If we let this drag out in the way that most government processes are dragged out, all we will do is approach the general election, and every other party apart from the party in government will say we will abandon local government reform, blah blah blah. They'll create a platform out of it, and it won't happen. And that's the issue. So it does need to happen. And what I hope happens is they make it happen, they let it bed down, and then they have another review just to tweak rather than make significant changes. But they've got to do it at speed, get it done, and get it out the way.
I buy that, but I suppose for this podcast, not surprised that we think the system we've got is shitty, but that's pretty rubbish, isn't it? I mean,
oh no, absolutely, it is rubbish. Shouldn't have to do it, but that's what happened. In the same way that every election, the two main parties are climbing over themselves to say they're not going to raise national insurance, they're not going to raise income tax, and all it does is hamstring the Chancery Exchequer in the way that we're seeing it. It's the way our politics works. It's the way our broken system works. That is the reality of things. If you want to make change, you've got to do it at speed.
But the problem is it ends up costing you more in the long run, because I think after 1974 it took a long time. Some of those problems have never been fixed. Yeah, again, if you look at the mowing maps for town councils and district councils around Huntingdonshire, you'll see a complete mess. But even when Alex and I were first elected, the schism from Peterborough, which had gone on more than a decade earlier, was still ongoing, wasn't it? We're still trying to untangle each other all that time later, which is mental. And so there's lots of that ahead of us as well. But I think to David's point about decisions we take for political reasons, I think that it seems like every district apart from one is lining up to take almost like, the decisions that would benefit their ruling administration politically. And I think the exception to that is Huntingdonshire, and partly that's because we are a coalition. But so in putting forward, so what's happened in the last couple of weeks or so is we're not backing any option yet. Yeah, we're funding option C, which is Huntingdonshire as part of South Cambs and Cambridge City. Yeah, which we understand in general that Cambridge City and South Cambs aren't in favour of. Yeah, but so we're funding that business case. But we've also decided, and I think this is it's been supported by the leadership of all the political groups at HTC, including the opposition, is funding this extra business case for what is now option E, which is Huntingdonshire as its own unitary, which I can understand is slightly controversial, quite controversial, because we'd be underpopulation, despite the fact that Huntingdonshire is, after Peterborough, is the biggest of all the districts, and is also going to see probably the most significant growth because of the EWR corridor across the border. Perhaps if we could, Chelmsford was something else that was announced at Labour Party conference. Sandhurst Newtown, which is going to be up to 40,000 people, and also there's going to be some strategic MOD development around RAF Whitton now, almost certainly as well. And so I think that those are the arguments that economically we're going to grow very, very quickly. We are the fastest growing part of the east of England, I think, with Wintringham and Alconbury, Weldon places, and so. I think that's part of the argument, just for making the business case, so we can make a data-driven solution. Also, let me just say that it's also supported by Ben Abisi-Jekti, who is the Conservative MP for Huntingdon, also supported by Nick Johnson, who was the former Labour Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So it's got a good level, across the
I get it. I understand it. Go on, David. Sorry.
So no, the thing is, you could, but though you. The problem is, I can see people like, this would be best for Huntingdonshire, and I can see you making that argument. But you can't. You're not actually trying to. There's no point doing something that is good for Huntingdonshire if the result is that you're leaving Fenland in complete penury or something like that.
But that's the challenge of LGR, isn't it? Is that's the reason why Huntingdonshire is getting sucked into the.
I would separate that, and the reason I would separate it is because you mentioned Fenland. I'm going to leave them. My issue is, the one thing I would say to Huntingdonshire about what they've done is I really, really applaud the vision in it. I really applaud the ambition in it. But that's the whole point about Fenland. If Fenland had vision and ambition, it would be doing something similar. My issue with Huntingdonshire is it's slightly hypocritical, but I think this is doomed to fail. And my problem is that as you push to this solution, which is doomed to fail, I think you move to a point where you lose your voice in terms of the other options that are available to you. I still think the best option for Huntingdonshire is to vote to split it in two.
Yeah, but that's not on the table apart from option D, which is the Peterborough sucking up some of Peterborough and like the Axley bit going towards a greater Peterborough. But that's not on the table. And again, we should be funding an option to split Huntingdonshire, but there's an infinite number of possibilities, isn't there? And you have to
absolutely.
And ultimately, when it comes down to it, our voice as a council, I know I'm on the cabinet, so I'm going to be part of the. We're going to have a debate at full council in which everybody's going to get their say, but ultimately in a cabinet system, the executive is going to make a decision for Huntingdonshire about which option we're going to back.
But ultimately,
will it have an influence on the final outcome made by government? I think the best thing we can do is make the case for Huntingdonshire, because I think sometimes in Cambridgeshire politics, Huntingdonshire is regarded as being a bit of a rural backwater when we're not. We're really not. So,
I don't agree that. I hear the same thing. I'm going to have to go in a second, but I don't agree with that. I think that view from Huntingdonshire, I hear in Fenland all the time. I suspect you go to East Cambs and you'll hear the same message in East Cambs. So I don't know if you can hear that. That's my granddaughter.
Yes, you can. I think it's time for your. Was it the cinema?
I've got to go. I've got a granddaughter to take to the cinema, but it's been fantastic this morning.
What are you going to see? Is a question.
Some Dora the Explorer, the movie, I think.
So that'll be. Try not to snore, Martin. Yeah.
Enjoy.
I shall. All right. Cheers, all.
I'll see you
All right.
later.
Anything else to say on that before we wrap up, guys?
David,
I'm going back to
any
bed.
LGR thoughts?
No.
No.
So the other thing I'm gonna say again is the aim is to come up with something that is good for the whole area, and so I would not want people to be saying, "Oh, this is what's good for Huntingdonshire," and so anything other than this is a betrayal of Huntingdonshire if what's being proposed is completely unworkable apart from a fabulously wealthy Huntingdonshire or Cambridge or whatever it happens to be.
Well, that's one of the things I don't know yet. So that's why I think I do support the direction to obviously do the business case on this. Because when I saw it first, I thought like, yeah, first of all, it didn't even cross my mind because I thought it will always be not the finances won't stack up. But now that the business case is in progress, if the study and the access to data, which I don't have, shows otherwise and shows is actually sustainable, like I wouldn't be opposed to something that is backed up by obviously in the wider context as well, but I simply don't know. And the reason why I never thought about like this is an option is because I thought like, oh, there's absolutely no way it was stack up financially, like we shouldn't even. So that's why I was like more in favor of, oh, let's split like South and North Huntingdonshire, like see how we can mix it with other councils, because I thought on its own it wouldn't make sense. But like now, if the business case shows otherwise, I'm happy to consider all the options really.
But like you said, David, as well, it's difficult to get councillors, who are elected basically by their local communities, and your first job. I mean, we've all got a social conscience, and we all care about wider issues. But the first part of your job as a local councillor is to represent your residents, and it's very hard for me, to make the case to people living in St Neots, that I would be choosing an option which is better for Fenland and for Peterborough, because like that's hard. These are all arbitrary lines on the map. Wisbech is a lovely place, and when I was a county councillor, I think when you're elected to an authority, then your duty is to represent all those people in those authority. But at the moment, I'm not elected to Fenland or Peterborough, and it's really difficult for me to put those interests over the direct interests of my residents, almost all of whom, if we were to have a referendum, would vote to stay in the south with Cambridge and South Cams, or maybe, well, in St Neots, nobody's going to vote. So as a St Neots councillor as well, Huntingdonshire isn't a popular brand, Everybody always thinks that Huntingdon gets all the resources, which is ridiculous. But that's the difficulty is that, we have to do right by our residents, but also, like you say, the exam question is about making sustainable authorities which aren't going to go bust in the future, and for that reason, that's why Huntingdonshire gets dragged in with places which would not be our first choice neighbours. Well, from the south part of the district anyway. I'm sure that Ramsey and Yaxley, or parts of Yaxley, not even all of Yaxley, would be.
But this is the thing. I think Huntingdonshire, if you think in the south, you've got the sort of small town, market towns, small towns and villages, but all quite close to each other. The north end is functionally Peterborough. It's an urban area.
Well, the very north end, but actually the most of the north end, because we were looking at the local plan and development opportunities. Most of the north is incredibly rural. It really is rural villages, and with almost no big plans for development up there, because actually, it's not financially viable. And so quite often you hear with local plan, we're going to, the whole of Huntingdonshire is going to get, completely destroyed by urban development. It's not true. The south of it, certainly, we're going to see a lot more urban stuff. But actually, so you've got Peterborough, I agree, Yaxley and Stilton and those places look towards Peterborough, and then lots of rural areas which probably, I don't know where they look to. I mean, I think the net flow of communities is to the north, from the north of the district, but elsewhere it's not. So it's I think I agree that there was always a good case for splitting Huntingdonshire as well, but that's not one that's come up in all the plans. So
I mean, like technically, government can still decide, like, well, we prefer like option like X or whatever, but we'll still make some changes to the map. And so
and I do think the other big thing is, though, that came out of the conference is Thamesford Newtown, which is going to be ultimately 40,000 people. I think we've also got Little Barford as a development, so just south of St Neots as well. I mean, if you know, we're not supposed to be able to move boundaries, but that big Greater St Neots conurbation, as it's going to be, being split across 3 different unitary authorities, is stupid. And so if you could bring in that economic development and an extra 40,000 people, which is the size of St Neots, then the whole thing is viable. So bending the boundaries, which we're not supposed to do, but would be in that case would make a whole lot of sense, I think, because it's going to be difficult to manage that.
But on bending the boundaries, I thought that you were allowed to do that. You just have to, you can't just do parts of an area. You have to do the whole area.
The whole area. Yes, if you put like the whole new town into one authority,
literally Little Barford and I think and Tempsford Newtown are basically 2 parishes, so it'd be like 2 parishes coming across. So it might be a possibility, and I think conversations are possibly ongoing behind the scenes. Not that I'm involved in any or have any direct knowledge of any, but that would make a huge amount of sense. But you'd have to I don't know if maybe you don't have to convince Central Beds or Bedford Borough to hand over those developments. Maybe it's a decision the government make. But I think if they're serious about, EWR and Oxcam Arc, or whatever it's called now, I think that would make a brilliant decision, and would definitely play into the case for a restoration of the historic county of Huntingdon, basically, wouldn't it? That's what we're talking about, but as a unitary authority. So. Right. Are we going to let David get back to bed? Are you going to go back to bed, David? You can have some Lemsip. Yeah, I think you need to. Well, thank you for dragging yourself out of bed.
No. It's fine.
I'm going canvassing.
Oh, lucky. Alex, I'm sorry. I'm not joining you today on the basis that you probably don't want me to sort of infect your
yes, it's okay. We just went over this this experience 2 weeks ago. So
yeah.
All right, then. Well, have a good Sunday, everyone, and see you next week.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.